ding 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 Yo, it's your boy AMG Dens, aka Sean Connery. I'm on the grid like a young Martin Brundle, and I'm selling stripping the dipping sauce in bundles. Lord of mercy. And today I'm here with some hot off the press sauce because this is the first episode for a weekly installment of post race reviews, and I'm gonna christen it with a nickname, the 8 p.m. debrief cookout. Looks at the camera or web camera like Harry Ainsley. And what can I say? I'm shaken but not stirred because I've got Blag, F1 Blag with me too. Blag, aka Piers Brosnan, how are you feeling today, man? I know that we joke quite a lot and have a running joke about the heat waves in the UK, but Jesus crispy, I think karma has really gotten us today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to add to my list people that complain in the UK about cold weather and hot weather, but in the last day I felt so hot. Those people do deserve to get cooked, but at the same time, Jesus, we need to get some aircon installed in the UK.
Bro, trust me, because it feels like radiation. It does not feel like it's not like when you go to Greece or you go to Cyprus or you go to the West Indies or like it's not that. It's just pure. I just feel like I'm just being roasted on a slow burner, which a lot of people have been getting roasted on a slow burner this week. So yeah, but any
Yeah.
any other things before I get into the first topic, like?
No, I mean, we couldn't have picked a better week. There's a lot to cook, so let's not keep people in suspense. Let's go for it.
Of course, we can't deprive them of the sauce. So, of course, man. But listen, let's get into the first topic of this brand new segment that we're introducing. And people know that I'm a very positive person. I don't genuinely like to start these podcast episodes off on a negative note, but there's a time and place for everything, and it is something very serious we need to address because there's a certain segment of people that follow Formula One. They refer to themselves as the Orange Army, but I don't see anything about them that resembles an army because they're definitely not noble. To me, to be honest, in my opinion, they're just a bunch of orange idiots and just a few select degenerate individuals behaving in a very concerning and wholly unacceptable manner. So it starts off with, people cheering for Lewis Hamilton having a crash, at which point he hadn't even come out of the car. So no one knew what his condition was. It progresses to things like using projectiles and flares in an inappropriate manner, which could potentially impair drivers' visions. It could prevent marshals from being able to do their job properly. And of course, as well, it ruins the experience for other fans too, because some people were saying they couldn't even see the start of the race because of the amount of projectiles that were let off. And then for me, this is where I really have to put my foot down, and I'm really sick of this shit with these people. And sorry to people tuning into this episode or just stripping the dipping for the first time. I tend not to cuss, but
Mm.
on this kind of topic, I have no mercy or no sympathy, and I won't take bullshit from certain people because there were some very alarming reports, F1 Black, that
Mm.
people, women, were at this race, as fans. They've spent their hard earned money to go and enjoy a race. And what it turns out to be is that some very silly, ridiculous and very stupid people that have no respect for other people, where they're sexually assaulting women. I've read a report about a woman that was there, and there were people in this fan base that were trying to pull down her skirt. This is absolutely unacceptable. It's so shocking to me, and it's absolutely disgusting. That is somebody's sister, it's somebody's mother, it's somebody's, like wife, it's somebody's partner. It's a human being. And to see the lack of regard, the lack of common courtesy, the lack of humanity showed from one to another, it's absolutely unacceptable. I wasn't around in 1950 when they had the first Grand Prix, but I can tell you that back then, Grand Prix and the ability to host a Grand Prix was an honor. It was a privilege. Not
Mm.
not you can't like you see even right now, like we're on the verge of getting a Kyalami Grand Prix, and it's not as simple as putting a racetrack there and thing. Like there are so many fundamental things that have to be right and in order for a country to hold a Grand Prix. So the bare minimum should be a place where the organizers and the people there managing the race, managing the spectacle, are overseeing these things and proactively doing something about it. And I think F1 needs to take a stance because it's not looking good. It's really not looking good.
burning a sort of Lewis Hamilton or Mercedes baseball cap. The only upside to that video is that Charles Darwin comes at the end and burns his hand because he's holding on to a fire and suddenly realizes it's hot. But the behavior is unacceptable. For me, what you say about banning the races is absolutely correct. There needs to be a reaction. I'll tell you who I'm going to cook this week. I'm going to cook the weasel words of the response. Let me read out a couple of responses, right? The first one is from F1, right? So, and listen to how factual this is. They're not saying that they care, right? They say, we have been made aware of reports. That's their first sentence. So, okay, of unacceptable comments, yeah? And the rest. And then it says, this is the bit where they sidestep, we have raised this with the promoter and security. That for me is like, here are the other people that should be taking care of this. This kind of behavior is unacceptable. Fine, these are all factual statements, but tell me how you feel about it and tell me what you're going to do about it. Mercedes were the only ones that covered themselves in glory and did something that could slightly compensate for how this woman in particular was treated. The second thing I want to read for you really quickly is the Red Bull response. Now, look, the Red Bull response came out after the Grand Prix. We knew about this on the Saturday. We knew about it on the Sunday morning. And then after the Grand Prix, listen to this first sentence. I don't even need to read the rest. The first sentence goes like this. Whilst we all enjoyed the passionate support of the majority of fans in Spielberg this weekend. It's like, you don't need to start with that.
You don't need to caveat with that, yeah. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Naomi is a trendsetter in the space that she's in right now, being like the first Black woman as a main Sky host for the Formula One show and Sky Sports content. And at the weekend, firstly of all, Lewis had the crash in the sprint race quali. Then we actually had the sprint race itself, where, essentially he got sandwiched by Pierre Gasly. And then it took him a while to get the overtakes done on one of the Haas drivers, being Mick Schumacher, but he got it done. But a kind of one-liner that Naomi said in their analysis and breakdown of that sprint race was that Perez had got past both of the passes whilst Lewis struggled. Well, we mentioned that people take little nuggets like this and they use it as ammunition for big kind of things against Lewis. And I think why people are surprised, of course, is because Lewis has always been really supportive of Naomi. And even in the recent backlash of these bigots that, again, not only are they on Tracks F1 Black, but they happen to also be on a space called Twitter too. Like, abusing women. That's what it is. It comes down to abusing women and saying that, she doesn't deserve to be there, but what? Because she's a woman? Get out of here. But anyway, in situations like that, Lewis has been very supportive of her. And I think actually one of the first people to be very vocal in sport. Perez actually had benefited overtaking both of the Haas drivers because the two of them were racing each other so hard into turn 3. They both actually missed the apex and Perez actually made a very easy move on the inside. That's A. Point B is that Lewis was basically driving a patched up car because with the severity of the crash, basically they had these new parts they brought to the car. They seem to have brought the car in the right step of direction. But with the cost cap, you can't make 1,000 rear wings. You can't make 1,000 front wings. It just isn't like efficient enough in terms of the cost cap. And on top of the man hours that you would need to produce all of these wings to that standard as well. It's a huge consideration for this year's Formula. So unfortunately for Lewis and George, they both had to revert back to an older spec wing and some older spec parts, which, as explained by Engine Mode 11 last week too, when you have basically replacement parts that aren't designed for that car, essentially, it can affect the car's performance. It can make the car less efficient in the air, more draggy, less top speed, because essentially this wing is an older spec wing that wasn't designed for this current Mercedes, and that wing hasn't basically been developed with all the learnings and data Lewis and the team have achieved or created.
So I must admit that I completely blanked Formula One on Saturday because I was at a wedding. So I got the rundown by Sarah from the 44. She literally gave me tweet for tweet the whole Naomi Schiff situation, which was great. And I think maybe there's a couple of things, couple of caveats. I feel like at the end there, you had it sizzling, you just turned it down, you just took it off the boil. So
Mhm.
I'm going to keep it simmering, not too high. I'll say, look, the two things I think we might be doing is one, we might be sensitive. So I know I'm very sensitive. If I sniff that someone's trying to put out a narrative, oh, Lewis hasn't done as well as George this weekend, or Lewis's performance, blah blah blah. I'm always sensitive to that. So first of all, I think to give her dues or to put some context in there, we might be a bit sensitive. The second thing is, and this is like a really tricky subject, and I'm going to say it while reminding you that I'm also mixed race. I think that when Naomi bursts into F1, there's almost a tokenism that makes people subconsciously say, well, she'll like Lewis Hamilton. She'll be on Team LH, rather than thinking she's just another presenter. I don't know where she's going to be on the, spectrum of drivers and her analysis. So those are the two pieces of context. I think, we might be more sensitive about things that could potentially be the anti-Lewis narrative, and we could be more sensitive to it coming from Naomi and putting a higher bar because we expect better for no other reason than her ethnic background. So those are the two bits of context. I've turned the hob right down. Now let me turn it back up. That is lazy. That is lazy punditry.
Mhm.
Anyone that she's a driver, she knows this. Look at that Mercedes. It hasn't had straight line speed for a good few years. Even so, do you remember the year when they found that Ferrari had an illegal engine? Even when they
Mhm.
turned that down, the Ferrari, the Mercedes engine was hardly better than Ferrari after that. Like Mercedes started the turbo hybrid with an incredible straight line speed advantage, and now in the formula they are the weakest. I don't know about Renault, but they're definitely at the back there. So for a start, trying to compare, Lewis struggled. Yeah, he struggled against two Ferrari engine cars. It's no coincidence that your Aston Martins, your Williams, they're all, even the McLaren this weekend are all like, either out of the points or struggling to get anywhere near the points. It's a power circuit. It's got the subtlety or the complexity of a Dorito crisp with a bite taken out of it. It's not an intricate downforce circuit, really. It's how fast can you blast it up to turn one, to turn three, to turn four. So yeah, to say that Lewis struggled, that's lazy.
This is like the Mick Schumacher I think we expected to get when he first came onto the scene. Like, like I almost turned into like Crofty or like whoever was the person that said, is that Mick? Mick's going quickly because he performed so well in Silverstone, and probably had it not been for Max's interesting transgressions, which we're going to get onto later on in the show, I think he would have scored more points. But just to see this racer, like, he really wasn't happy with the team and essentially their call to kind of keep the cars as they were. And at times, it actually seemed like he was the faster driver out of the two between him and Magnussen. So he's really holding on there. And because he couldn't get past Magnussen, you had Lewis like hot on their heels, and then even
Mm.
a couple of other cars. I think the two McLarens and one of the Williams, I think, were on the back of that pack too. It might have been Bottas actually, caught up to the back of that train in the sprint race too.
I must admit there was a kind of a Twitter short or something, like a little short video, and his face just had a whole new like range of emotions. It's like a computer game where you get to create a character, and like when you get good at the game, it lets you have a few more emotions. Like his face looked a little bit like what is that, Devon? What was that guy called? Devon Butler or something?
Dan Butler from
From
the
yeah,
Codemasters games.
he kind
Yeah.
of was like he turned heel, he turned bad guy, and just started looking like they asked him like should have your team cost you today? And he just looked into the middle distance and looked pissed off. Pardon my French. So I mean, what do I think about his performance? Ultimately, the attitude is secondary to the performance. He's getting points now. He's matching or beating his teammate. Thank God that he got a good teammate. Can you imagine if the bar's not set high? This is what Mario Andretti was saying the other week.
Mhm.
He sets his targets against the best in the class. If you're in the back of the grid in the slowest car and your teammate is bang average at best, and that's an insult to average, you don't know how to raise your game. If you've got another guy that's getting a second a lap out of the car that you didn't know was possible, then you start climbing that mountain and trying to get there. So yeah, his performance absolutely night and day from the start, the first test, the start of the season where Magnussen was fastest in one of the test days, fastest in one of the sessions. I think he was in online to get a P4 at one point. I can't remember if he got it. And Schumacher was nowhere to be seen or barely scratching around. And now, yeah, he's absolutely on it. And fair play. Let's see if it's consistent. But that's actually, a huge improvement. And let's just think about it for a second. We talk about the narratives. When Bottas was let go, there was a little bit of like, yeah, well, Bottas has been there for 5 years. But there was also people questioning George, is he ready? He's only been in the back marker team. No one's asking those questions now. And it's the same I think, with Schumacher. Like, Mick Schumacher's career, if you talk to people about 3 races ago, was finished. They were like, well, he probably deserves, to get moved on at the end of this season. Now, I don't think he does. And if you then factor in how marketable his name is, he's booked himself another season at least based on the last 3 races, which shows you how strong it's been.
Basically, the lifeline of the team was hanging by a thread because Gene Haas was like, if it can't get better, I don't want to be here anymore, basically. So every point to Haas, whether it's this generation or the previous generations, makes it's fatal to that team's existence. So I can understand it from that point of view. I can also understand it from the individualistic point of view of Mick, because bear in mind, he was on a good run in Miami. He messed it up when he crashed into Uncle Seb. Uncle Seb's Aston Martin, he mashed it up, but we forgave him for that. He could have got points in Monaco in a very treacherous conditions. He wrote the car off there. Then he was really, really close as well in some of the previous races, like Canada, for example. And then he turns up in Silverstone, finally scores points. He's no longer a points virgin. Finally pops that cherry. But then the next kind of thing is, what else you got for me? What's next? Because, you don't want to be a one-hit wonder. You don't want to be known for scoring like 1 or 2 points when your teammates getting points pretty much every other race. So there was opportunity for him there to get some points if he had finished ahead of Hamilton, because they restructured the point system, obviously, for the sprint races this season. And I think it would have been tricky for Haas to engineer that, of course, with backing Magnussen into Mick, because there's a point where it's effective and it just becomes a point where it's not effective. And we also have to bear in mind as well the character that Kevin Magnussen is. Like, he might do certain things for the team, but Kevin is an out and out racer too, and he would take milk away from a baby, So it's not in his nature, I feel, to do that either. So, and also just something that came into my head there as well. You remember the kind of crashes that him and Grosjean had in the very memeable Rich Energy Haas from a couple of years ago too.
Nice.
Things get red hot at Ferrari because Charles and Sainz were basically almost imploding in the sprint race when they basically allowed Max to drive away when the two of them were battling each other in that sprint race. And, I think it's a cool dynamic because you've seen that off of that race win, Carlos Sainz, he's also another one that burst his top step virginity, finally won a race, he's fired up and rejuvenated and trying to, match Leclerc week in, week out now and really trying to go for it, which shows that he's an amazing driver. But ultimately, for me, F1 Black, Charles is the ultimate racer. And I hope people can make the distinction between the two, because Charles just gives no tosses. And that bold move he made up the inside of Sainz. And even again, this the racecraft there, Black, as well. Because I don't know if you noted this, but when he overtook Carlos, the time when he actually made the move stick, he turned into the corner and then he was like, oh, okay. Like, Sainz might try and hang it around outside. I'll open up the steering wheel again and run in wide. And I was like, you cheeky devil. No wonder why you've got Max Verstappen in your back pocket. His racecraft is just unfettered, which is very interesting.
I'm going to sit on the fence, but you'll see why. I think it's too early to do team orders where you're calling one driver to get out of the way no matter what. But I do think that Ferrari have cost themselves race time when the fastest driver is behind the slower driver. So I think if you're in the middle of a race, one guy's got the pace, the other guy hasn't got the pace, do not hold up the faster guy. You can switch back later if things switch. But, at Silverstone, for example, Sainz didn't have the pace. Leclerc was trying to get through. It took them laps and laps and laps to switch the cars. And that could have cost Leclerc if he'd been, if there was no final safety car, Hamilton would have come through and would have got both of them because Leclerc wouldn't have built up a cushion based on that race pace that he had earlier on. And then if you get to kind of Austria, again, in the sprint race, if they're battling, that's letting the other guy get away. Yeah. So I agree. It's great to see the fighting. We saw Alpine, where was it? Jeddah, giving us otherwise it would have been a boring race. And then Alpine allowed us to ruin their race, but have both of their drivers scrapping and then Alonso breaking down in the pit lane, which made it spicy as well. I don't want to miss that racing, but if you're in a championship and you basically have to minimize your race time, I'm not saying that it should always be Leclerc that gets the advantage, but we should be trying to get, if you're the Ferrari team, one Ferrari to the finish line at the very minimum time. So in the case of Silverstone, it was obvious that Leclerc had the pace. And then if you look after the safety car and what happened at Silverstone, maybe there was nothing they could have done. Maybe they should have done pitted both of them, whatever it was. But they ended up from an easy 1-2 into whatever it was, 1-5. Who knows? And then in Austria, luckily for Leclerc, he had the pace on the Sunday. I think there was something to do with tires and keeping them in and making them last. He overtook Max 3 times on track. That was like the ancestors knew that they needed to repay something to that Orange Army after the antics of the day before. And they didn't want to overtake once or twice. It was 3 times, which I found incredibly enjoyable. But yeah, to come back to the answer of your question, I don't think that they should always be favouring Leclerc. But if he's got the pace, don't hold him up because it's going to be marginal. You saw at the end of that race.
FIA, fraud in Austria. I think that's a great title. That's an absolute worldie. Because again, we're here again, F1 Black. We're here again. Because, they've been back at it again with they've been consistent and being inconsistent with these decisions. Because, namely, they give Alex Albon a 5-second penalty for forcing off another driver off the track, in the sprint qualifying at turn 2. But then they didn't punish Max for doing the same thing to Charles back in 2019 at exactly the same corner. Then also, if you want to take it back a week before, if you want to re-eat wine like Craig David, you also have to bear in mind that it happened again last week when Perez basically forced Lewis off the circuit at turn 3. And then also, they then didn't give a penalty to Albon for basically understeering into Seb. When actually, basically Lewis got a 5-second penalty for understeering into Albon in 2020. So for me, F1 Black, like the stewarding levels, they're all-time low. Even the drivers are fed up with their crap because we also had alarming news on Sunday morning that basically Seb Vettel, the role model of the show, because it's him that they say is the role model of the sport, not Lewis, if with the agendas that they run. So the ambassador of the sport walked out of a FIA meeting. So what is happening for the role model of the sport to be pissed off so much that even he walked out of it because he's fed up of listening to these guys and their inconsistencies.
Basically, Lewis had to back out because Vettel would have had him in the wall otherwise. That was correctly, by the letter of the rules, a penalty for unsafe rejoining the track. But then after that, they started a philosophy of let them race, aka an overreaction. And then at the Monza Grand Prix, you got to the point where Leclerc had Lewis up alongside him and then steered. So it was into, what would it be, turn 3. So the second chicane, he then turned away from the corner to push Lewis basically into the escape road. Their tires touched, and then nothing happened. He got something called a black and white flag, like a yellow card, and they said the philosophy here is let them race. I feel like they've now gone the whole other way after Abu Dhabi, where they said, "Oh, well, you didn't think that we applied the rules correctly, so now we're going to change the rules for outside overtaking, and then we're going to apply them a lot." So if you look at what happened at this weekend, I think it might have been a different a different steward, so that's not going to help. You have two race directors. One of them might have one philosophy, one of them might have another, and I think George said that. And then the other point is, you know, if you basically are on the inside of a corner, you're up alongside someone who, might I add, is trying to overtake you, and then you're turning in, you're tight to the apex, and they hit you. What more can you do? You know, I feel like we need to be grown up. This is not a PlayStation or Xbox or Nintendo Wii. We need to give each other room. If there's contact, we'll see what happens. But Perez had a load of room on the outside. Meanwhile, if you look at consistency between weekends, you saw Albon getting penalised for something that both Perez and Max did in abundance in the last race. What we need is the stewards need to back off. We need the drivers to take more responsibility for their quality of driving. We know when, like, everybody knows when people have taken the Mickey, and ultimately, if they keep interfering in the race, and they keep interfering in a way that one day everything's black, the next day everything's white, left right, then we're going to have a nonsensical result. And guess what? Liberty won't get the money they want. They won't get all those new people tuning in, because I can't even follow this sport, and I've been watching it for nearly 30 years. I'm going to try to be rational for a second, but before I do, you reminding me of Jeddah from last year. The thing that took the cake was, after all of that, after the brake check, after the coming on track and causing Lewis to sort of hammer the brakes, driving Lewis off the track, even on one of those restarts, basically Max putting out the inside and just saying, I'm not going to brake, and then it's up to you to get out of the way. Like, after all of that, then Lewis gets a black and white flag for basically Max just trying to run round on a corner that was always going to run out. And Lewis getting a black and white flag for quote unquote crowding another driver off the circuit. That's when I have my doubts and I get emotional. But trying to be rational, I think the problem with the FIA is competence, and this might help us segue across to the technical regulations as well. In any organization, in any pursuit, in any endeavor, let's take a small business, right? Let's say you're a proud father and you're like, you could have a small business and it might be okay just to give it to your son or your daughter and you let them take over. But then if you scale that up and you're a proud father, but you run quite a difficult organization and you go, oh yeah, I'll let my son, who's like basically really stupid or not interested or whatever, I'll let him come and work for me, and then I'll give him the business. Basically nepotism does not lead to the best people getting the job. And I just worry with the FIA that you've got to, I was going to say something incredibly rude, which I won't, but you've got to, do enough favors on the way up. Let's put it that way. You've got to ingratiate yourself with the people already in power for years, and then you'll get your way in. If you look at all the people, look at the path that Mohammed Ben Sulayem took to get to where he is. Look at the people that are the regional leads in the FIA, and they're going to be the next vice presidents and presidents of the FIA. Like, the reason that people get there is not on merit. They get there because they're on the in crowd. They ingratiate themselves. They say the right things. They act the way that the FIA wants them to act. It's not a meritocracy. And so my view, if I'm trying to be super rational, is that what all the things we're seeing, be it on the sporting side or on the technical side, is a lack of competence. And then if you look at the technical side, I was reading quotes from Toto Wolff from just after the British Grand Prix. FIA only just discovered around that time that some teams were flexing their plank. And now they've only just discovered that some teams have basically got a skid block that doesn't wear away and it hides inside the plank, and it gives them an advantage when it comes to porpoising. Why? So the rules are clear. It's just the FIA have been incapable of testing effectively to enforce their rules. And I think, yes, it does favor Red Bull. I feel furious about it that the teams have allowed this to happen. But extending the leeway that they've given teams another couple of races in the entire summer break to basically come into compliance with the rules. You could argue that the FIA is just purely acting in favor of Red Bull, or you could argue that they're embarrassed that they're incompetent And then they don't want to basically show that up by then all of the lead teams suddenly jumping up and down like kangaroos on the track, and it will just highlight their incompetence. I still think he's going to win a race. I think he'll win a race this season. There's a little part of me in sort of somewhere in my heart, the small boy that started watching Formula One back in the day, a long, long time ago. I think he's only 99 points off. 12 races to go. We don't know what's going to happen with this floor. I just want to see a Red Bull bouncing. I really do. It will be, I might go down Tesco and get one and just and do it. But we don't know what's going to happen after the FIA get their act together and start enforcing, the rules. So I hope Hamilton will win a race. I've read somewhere that France, which is the next one, some things on the 24th, is a kind of a good candidate for Lewis, for Mercedes. I think it's quite smooth, has similar characteristics in some ways to Silverstone, not completely. So let's see how we go. So I think Lewis will win a race. I'd love to see George win a race as well. That will break his duck. In an ideal situation, the heart says, come on, Mercedes, come on, Lewis, see what we can do. In terms of king of the midfield, so, while you were talking, I was looking at the championship, and even though, the McLaren, is underpowered with that Mercedes engine, they've had their issues start of the season and so on. Norris has got quite a comfortable sort of best of the rest position. So, as we speak, he's on 64. So he's in seventh, after Lewis. And because the top three teams are 1 to 6 in terms of drivers. So he's on 64. Then Ocon is another 12 back in 52. And when you get to that level of points, like 12 points is quite a lot. How many points is it for 12? Is that fourth place? Something like that, fifth or fourth? So, you have to have a really good weekend to make that up and the other person not score it. So, I would say Norris will probably be disappointed at the end of the year, but will finish the best of the rest. Ocon is having a great season compared to his teammate. He's on nearly double the points. The person that's sort of gone under the radar here, and, I have to admit, I had him on Fraud Watch back in the day, Valtteri Bottas. He's on 46 points. He's in ninth in the championship at the halfway stage. So, for me, when you look at the Alfa Romeo last season was the third worst car. It's probably on a par with the Williams back then. This season, Williams have got 3 points between their drivers. And Bottas on his own has got 46. Yeah, maybe that's to do with the Ferrari engine, but it's also to do with Bottas because, his teammate, Zhou's only got 5. And yeah, clearly he's in his rookie season, but that's a huge performance. In terms of looking forward, yeah, French Grand Prix, I honestly don't like the track. Don't know what's going to happen, but I hope it's another good one for Mercedes. They don't normally do well at Austria. The fact that they were doing well, nobody else had car damage. You got a podium and a fourth. That's pretty good. There's the Hungarian Grand Prix after that. Lewis has a mixed history with that track, lots and lots of wins, but a few tricky races. I think the season for us begins in the 14th round in Belgium, and that'll be after the summer holidays. We'll all come back refreshed. I'll be going to the Balearics, a bit of time in Mallorca, and then we'll come back full of energy.
When really and truly, they should just be they should focus on being loyal to their missus, and some of them should be focused on paying their taxes. Because I heard HMRC looking to lock up a certain Mr. Eccleston for tax fraud. This has been, the 8 p.m. How should I say it? The 8 p.m. debrief cookout. Again, a great segment, and it's going to be weekly too, so you can get the lovely dynamics of me, and of course as well F1 Piers Brosnan as well, just for all the sauce and all everything. And shout out Georgina as well. I don't think people realize behind the scenes, the woman is a legend, and we're so thankful to her. She's so meaningful to us. She's really trying to create something different, and it's hard to be different. It's hard to be different. We can talk about that on another episode. But listen, Georgina's the GOAT. And luckily she doesn't drive a boat. She doesn't drive a W13. But, she's amazing. I can't commend her highly enough. I can't encapsulate in words just how amazing she is. especially with what's happening around the world, in Sri Lanka, and I do pray for the people there as well that they can find peace, because the world could really need it right now in these times. And, it's unfair to the working people like her, the hardworking people like her, the people like her brother that are in university studying and making sacrifice for a better future, that things like that are being taken away from them, or they're not being able to live the sort of life they deserve to live, So, yeah, just wanted to put that out there, say a prayer for all the fans and followers that listen to us too. And also, guys, feel free at any time as well to shout out me and F1 Blag, and obviously we've got the Stripping the Dipping account as well on Twitter. We love the engagement. We love the tweets. We want to know what you hear about. We want to know your theories. We want to get engaged with you guys, because this is what the community is about ultimately. We need to give back to the people that feel put us here. So it's amazing, to do that. And yeah, send us anything and everything. Funny memes, tweets, conspiracies, all here for it, man. And yeah, I will let the legendary F1 Black take the final word on this episode.
So yeah, tell us who we should cook next week. This has been Mr. Hammer Hammer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton is the GOAT. W13 is a boat,
Lot of
But
mercy. Rewind.
meantime, I've been Mr. Hammer Time when the winning is easy. We hope the winning will be easy, but until then, you'll have the cooking with us. Wherever you hear us, give us that review, give us that thumbs up, give us that like, that 5-star. You know what it's like. Really, it should be 7-star, 104 wins. But there we are.
Yeah,
But I'll take it. Exactly. I'll take us out on that note. It's been my pleasure to be joining AMG Dens. This is F1 Blag. This has been the 8 p.m. debrief cookout. See you next week. Bye.